got my peaches out in Georgia.
A very pleasant good afternoon and welcome to the show this afternoon. We want to say thank you very much for joining us on the live this afternoon. My name is Randolph Critchlow. I want to welcome you to the live this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. As usual, as we say on the afternoon rush, folks, let's unpack. Welcome all. Welcome. It is another wet day here in Georgetown. It is Thursday, the 3rd of June, 2021. My name is Randolph Critchlow. Welcome to those persons joining us internationally in the region and right here in Guyana. We are going to be unpacking some issues in the news, making the news here in Guyana. We want to say thank you very much for being a part of what we're doing here. Let me say this. We're going to be talking about COVID-19 that's reaching 400 today. A very, very dark and sad day in our country, as we have to, count up these numbers of persons who have lost their life to COVID-19. We're also going to be talking about the fallout over there at GWI with the fires. Supposedly 300 workers are slated to be terminated, and we're going to be talking to Dr. Van West Charles in a little bit because I know we had a press conference today, and but for those persons who missed the press conference, we're going to give you a little more in-depth discussion and unpacking with Dr. Van West Charles. Of course, he was in charge of GWI-1, so he has some great insight into the running of that particular organization. Let me say good afternoon to everyone who has joined so far. We like to do it here on The Rush. We say, let us know where you're joining us from in the comment section. We're also going to be joined by a young man who many would have asked for the last time he was on the show, Mr. Elson Lowe, who works with the leader of the opposition. He's going to explain to you exactly what he does there. I always have to remember what he does there. And we're gonna talk a little bit about COVID-19 with Mr. Elson Lowe in just a bit. But let me say good afternoon to all of the people who are joining. Remember, you can share the live stream. If you're looking at us on YouTube, you can give us a like and give us a subscribe and let us know how you're enjoying the program. Just say where you're joining us from in the comment section, as we like to do. We'll give you a little shout out. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Miss Toby, thank you very much for being a part of the program. Good afternoon to all of you. Linden Town is in the house. West Side, New Jersey, Berbice, East Coast, West Coast, Berbice. Thank you very much for joining. Somebody saying they're joining from the veranda. Thank you very much. From St. Lucia, our friends in Barbados. Miss Hazel Griffith, I see you're a Chelsea fan. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. All over the world, New Jersey again, New York, Los Angeles. For my friends who are normally tuned to the show, we like to poke fun at the NBA, and we know both LA teams are in a bit of trouble, the Los Angeles Clippers and the Lakers. That is a pivotal game 6 this evening. I'll be locked into that. North Carolina is in the house. Thank you very much. Barbados again. Georgia. Right. Thank you very much, folks. Let's get into it. Again, remember, share the live stream. Let your friends and family know that we're about to unpack some credible and valid information. Vancouver is in the house. BVI, Canada. Thank you very much, California. Right. Let's get into it, folks. I'm going to invite my first guest this afternoon, a young man who joined the show the other day, and we had very interesting discussion. But before he comes in, let me share this with you folks. Let me share this because this is quite something. Today, COVID death toll reached 400. 4 new fatalities recorded on Thursday today. and the death toll has now climbed to 400 persons. Quite quite a sad number to be reporting, folks. To help me unpack this, the first part of my show, I'll invite in Mr. Elson Lowe. Elson, good afternoon to you, sir. Your microphone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you again for having me on.
Right. Thank you very much, Elson. The title that your designation there, the leader of the opposition, it always twist my tongue. Please explain to us what you do at the leader of the opposition office.
Sure. I am the Economic and Youth Policy Advisor at the Leader Opposition's Office.
Economic and Youth Policy Advisor. Right. Mr. Elson, who's a friend of the show by now, and I'm hoping that you can help us to unpack some of what we've been seeing. As I shared just now, we've hit 400 persons who would have lost their life to COVID. And it at some point in time we have to stop and take stock and ask ourselves what really is being done to deal with this and to curb this and to slow down this runaway train seemingly. So let me allow you to jump in here, Elson. From your perspective, what is happening?
Well, the first thing I would say is, having crossed the 400 mark, I'd like to see that when this pandemic eventually does wind down, we have a real day of remembrance, a real day of mourning, a national day of mourning, because we've really been through a difficult circumstance, and we're seeing that a lot of people are dying, many of whom didn't need to die if we had adopted different policies. And one of the central thrusts that I want people to grasp is that what you're seeing from the PPP is essentially a version of what you saw from Trump in the US. That is to say, you avoid the problem, you avoid any kind of direct addressing of the problem, and you hope that the vaccines will save everything, right? That was the approach that he took. He threw everything into the vaccine and he refused to actually deal more directly with the problem. Whereas you saw some of the Democratic governors and so on actually instituting lockdowns when Trump himself would never recommend a lockdown. Yeah. And it is not necessarily that you need to have the sort of large scale, multi-months, anything crazy. But what you really should have, which is something that he never really accepted, is you need to have a periodic break, temporary break, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, every now and then, to try and keep things from getting out of control. You'll observe that in the last month, we had, 97 deaths in the month of May?
Yeah.
So just to give your listeners some initial perspective, you mean to tell me that over the entire time that Guyana has had COVID-19 affecting it, which is over a year now, or about a year now, we've had 400 deaths total, but a quarter of all of those deaths occurred within the last month? Yeah. Can you see how that is a significant change? A quarter of all the deaths that happened in Guyana related to COVID-19 occurred in the last month.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a clear red flag that we need to have a temporary pause. It doesn't have to be something severe multi-month, but we should have a week, maybe 2 weeks to cool things off, take stock of the situation, and then to move forward. Now, that is one recommendation that I would put forward, and a recommendation that I've put forward to the opposition as well. But one of the things that is important is that we also see a lot of misinformation, which leads people to think that lockdowns don't do anything, they're not effective, might as well you don't lock down. And a lot of this information is patently false. Anyone who makes just a quick Google search will note that there are endless articles indicating the effectiveness of lockdowns in reducing COVID-19 spread. We had the former president make a remark that there's no empirical evidence that lockdowns are helpful, and in fact that it's worse in other Caribbean countries that have had lockdowns. And I had to express some amusement when I heard that, because he must have known that it would be very easy for somebody to disprove that. I mean, again, there's endless articles illustrating that lockdowns do work. There's a study by Imperial College London, one of the most respected universities in London, which indicates that in the European Union, 3.1 million lives were saved of people who would otherwise have died if they had not implemented any lockdowns. 3.1 million lives were saved, right? And the way that we want to now ground that, or to get a grasp of that in local terms, is when you look at the death rate per million people. Now, the death rate per million people will allow you to get a sense of the death rate across countries, because obviously countries have different sizes. Some are larger, some are smaller. So the death rate per million people is a good measure to look at to get a sense of the effectiveness of a country's policies as well as the severity of the disease. If
As
you look,
let me just jump in here. Elson, you mentioned something about death rate. Um,
Mhm.
Luckily for us here on the rush this afternoon, we have in our midst Dr. Van West Charles. And of course, you and I are not medical doctors, so we'll lean on his
Of
expertise as
course,
we talk about the vaccines and death rates and give the people a better idea of what is happening. Dr. Charles, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Randy. Hi, Elson.
aye,
Thank you very much for
yes,
joining us. I know Elson brought up the topic of death rate. And I know you had mentioned today early in your press conference that we have one of the highest death rates in the Caribbean. You care to expand on that?
Right. So it's not simply the English-speaking Caribbean. If you look at the Caribbean as defined by PAHO WHO, which includes the DR, Cuba, Curacao, etc., you would see in terms of the number of deaths, the number of cases, that we are at a much higher rate than compared to uh, places like Cuba. For example, Cuba would have 142,000 cases, but the number of deaths are about 985, which gives you the rate of about the percentage of deaths of the total number of cases being about 0.6%. Whereas in our case, and then when I did a bit of analysis looking at most of the countries, including Trinidad, etc. We are at about 2.2%, right? But and it may be a bit higher now. We've gone to 400 cases. Now there are a number of things that we must do, and I don't think we are doing many things efficiently. Um, the contact tracing, which should be done, I don't think we have enough people on the ground, because if you assume only 3 contacts for every case that you find, that's a significant number of people that you have to test,
Mhm.
right? Um, the administration needs to make it clear how the tests are being done, whether we are going to be doing the antigen test, and I think this disaggregate it and disseminate it in bringing some of the private sector physicians and others on board,
Mhm.
so that if having done the antigen testing and there's a negative, then we move on to the PCR.
Yeah.
But and immediately, if you're negative, then I move you immediately into the vaccination queue, and I begin to vaccinate at the same time we are testing, at the same time we are doing efficient contact tracing. Now, the other issue is, as Elson is referring to, the issue of the lockdown.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's a simple lockdown, because we've got to look at some of the conditions under which we lock down. In our case, we haven't got a proper discussion. We haven't had discussions on a proper safety net. We assume the 25,000 has been a safety net. It isn't. Um, and therefore, we have a country with 35% poverty. Now, a lot of people in this group live from day to day. The transport that they use is basically the minibuses, which are all packed,
Yes.
and transmission. And most important, we are, I think, working in the blind. We are not doing any form of genomic sequencing. So when asked about the variants, we haven't got any positive answer as to which variants may be circulating. Now, we are not an island. We are a mainland state. We have borders. We, as a country, we cannot surveil the borders properly. People are moving back and forth.
Yeah.
And we do know on the border with Brazil, we have the P1 variant, which whose transmissibility is very high, and there also is the B1617, which is the variant which has been circulating in India, but not only India. Now, and a new variant which has emerged in Brazil off of the P1, which is called P4.
Mhm.
Now, also on the Venezuelan side, and that's why you're seeing the movement from the Venezuelans into Trinidad, and Trinidad is having also a serious problem. So we have to do some other things. We have to certainly try to move with genomic sequencing for us to have a sense of which variants are circulating, if they are in Guyana or not.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone a good way down the road, and we can't say one way or the other, hey, we've got one variant, we've got two variants from, or we have no variants. But I think we need to come to the point of some conclusion. Um, the work done at the airport maybe should be tightened because of our conditions, but we have to do much more. I think also I would suggest even the protocols at Liliendal we may want to look at. Let us open it up to many of the physicians in Guyana and Guyanese physicians overseas as a way of examining what is happening, how we are treating, are we doing the best we can, are we from the laboratory side doing a lot of work which would give us some additional markers to help people to do a bit more prognosis at earlier times, etc.
Yeah.
So I think there are a number of things which we have to do, but most important, we have to define this as a national security issue. If we define it as a national security issue, we will understand that this is not for a certain group. This has to be opened up. This has to include not only the opposition, but other players in the country so that we bring everybody on board and ensure that we can really, it's a small population. It should not, if we come together and we see this as a national security issue, we should be able to bring this thing under control at a much shorter pace.
Yeah.
But if we believe that only one group knows how and other citizens in the country do not know, then we're going down a wrong road.
Yeah. Doc, let me bring Elson back here. I know Elson, where you were talking about lockdowns just now, and this this idea of whether or not lockdowns work, and I know Doc mentioned it just now. It has to be certain things have got to be done, and certain considerations need to be taken in hand. But Elson, what would be your suggestion? I know you were going to that place just now in terms of how you deal with the lockdown.
Well, one of the things that I think is important to note first off, and this is something that comes up often, is that there hasn't been a particularly large provision within the budget that was passed regarding COVID measures and COVID support for businesses, support for workers. And as a result of that, we're kind of scrambling as to how we would support people during a lockdown. There needed to be a budget that was focused on the immediate crisis, which is the COVID-19 crisis. And I have said as well that that 25,000 that they gave, first of all, being insufficient in size, you should at least be giving something that is around the minimum wage. As public servants, that's a meager amount as well. But what you needed to do is to have multiple rounds for us to provide satisfactory stimulus to the economy. Recently, the Bank of Ghana statistics came out, and the unemployment rate is elevated. That is because we do not have as much stimulus as we really need to get the economy going, and as a result, business people have been complaining, and so on and so forth. So that is the grounding that will facilitate lockdowns. And it's as again, I'm not saying that you need to have prolonged lockdowns, but when you have such things get accelerated, you need to step on the gas, provide support to those who need support, and then when we've got the rate limit under control, we resume as we progress towards full vaccination. One of
Yeah.
the things that I think, it is good that Guyana has been able to get such a high vaccination rate. I'm seeing something like 42%, which is robust, but we still have a long way to go. And we can't realistically be thinking that until we reach the level of herd immunity or whatever level of vaccination we're targeting, we're just going to ignore COVID and whoever dies, dies. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a ridiculous approach to take. And in fact, one of the things that I think we can look at is if we compare the death rate in Guyana to the death rate in Barbados or Trinidad, where you've seen far fewer deaths, you can come to some sort of an estimation as to how many excess people, that is to say, people who would not otherwise have died, have died. Now, of course, the medical systems in these countries will vary and the quality of care will vary. But a rough calculation, just looking at statistics right now, deaths per million, implies that about 170, 180 Guyanese who would not otherwise have died because we have resisted any form of lockdown. Whereas our Caribbean neighbors have managed to preserve life, we have one of the highest death rates in the Caribbean, and the world average death rate, which is 476 per million, we are above that. We're at 501. So we are above the average death rate for the entire world. We're doing worse than the average. That
Yeah.
is not acceptable. Why should we be doing worse? We
Yeah.
need to have a program which marries vaccination efforts with being aware of the circumstances and temporary shutdowns to allow us to get to the vaccination amount without a tragedy. And that is why I started off by saying I hope that at the end of all of this, there is a day of national mourning because the COVID-19 pandemic has been a national tragedy. And as at least as it stands, you can simply see that around 180 people who would not otherwise have died have passed away because of this.
Right.
Randy?
Doc, do you concur?
Yes, and that's why I'm saying this is the safety net for
Mm.
people, the safety net for businesses, etc. I agree with Elson, but also we have to consider the housing and looking at the quarantine centers and the isolation,
Mm.
because in many cases when people are sent for isolation or quarantine, the conditions in the home are not right, and
Yeah.
therefore you take the hinterland populations. We should have by now prepared to build some proper quarantine centers. But as I said before, quarantine centers, the concept of a quarantine center is not a prison. And
Yeah.
it has to have certain conditions where people can have their lives, their daily lives moving. But we have not taken this on in a way and invested in a way that to we have some strategic approach at different levels, and the conditions from one region to the another differs. So we do know that we have population statistics,
Mm.
how where the over 65s, over 70 people are, and we should have moved first of all to ensure those people are immunized, protect them. How we go around building the herd immunity. I'm glad to see that the government has now brought in Johnson and Johnson, which I've been advocating for some time for the regions 1, 7, 8, and 9.
Yes.
I have asked that we put a pause on Sputnik, and I've asked for that for a specific reason. That Sputnik is not yet approved by WHO. And what it is with us, why we have to not follow some global approaches is beyond me. Um, and we are spending the money in a way which I think could be spent much differently.
Yeah. Um, I came across a one of the I don't think I have it here, but one former minister of health um Valda Lawrence, who, commented about 12 hours ago, and she said, we are creeping towards a crisis. Do you gentlemen believe that we are there yet in terms of COVID-19 in Guyana?
Well, I put it to you simply. If we have 400 deaths total in the country due to COVID-19, and in
Mhm.
the last month, a quarter of those deaths, a quarter of those deaths occurred in the last month, that is as big a red flag as you're going to see.
Yeah.
Because it means that the rate at which deaths were occurring in that last month is what, 8 times, 9 times, 10 times as high as on the average before. In order for 1 month after almost over a year of this pandemic to have such a sharp increase,
Yeah.
it means that that's a red flag. And so that's why I'm advocating that we should have a pause, try to get things together, and then progress once we've got a little bit of stability. But unfortunately, it seems that things will accelerate because there's not been any adjustment in policy to really try and cool things off.
Right.
Even with there is an issue of confidence in vaccines in the
Yes.
country. So I think we need to have a separate monitoring system for vaccines so that people have confidence, people can gain. And that's why I'm saying that we need to put a pause because people are reading, young people are reading, young people should be vaccinated. But when they go to a WHO site or they go to CDC and they see that these vaccines are not used in certain metropolitan countries,
Yes.
or these vaccines are not approved as yet by WHO, and the information is there, questions are raised. Why should we take this?
Hmm.
So, and while I believe that it's important for vaccination to occur, I really would like to see a speedier approach to vaccination because it builds herd immunity very, very quickly, especially in the border countries, and protects the coast. So
Yeah.
I hope as quickly as we because of the variants, but then other variants may be occurring in Georgetown that we don't know of, and the genome sequencing is critical for us to be embarking on.
Yeah.
So I think the administration needs to just be open up a bit. Let us all talk and build confidence, build trust, so that we can move this process forward.
All right, gentlemen. I know we can have an entire show on COVID-19, but I'm happy I have both of you here as we switch from one crisis, in my view, to another. We're going to be talking about and Elson's, hold on, do not go. I want your take on the other topics that we'll be discussing as we move to another crisis. We see the Guyana Trade Union Congress today rejecting plans by the Guyana Water Incorporated to terminate some 300 workers. Dr. Van Westers, we know you are head of this agency before, and I know you dealt with this in some details today. But in in layman's terms, explain to us what is happening there at Guyana. Why is it that these persons are being terminated?
Well, we're moving from, which is not understandable. We're moving from the discussion now from COVID to GWI.
Yes.
Now, established in one of the principal strategies for COVID is the issue of access to water for hand washing,
Yeah.
sanitizing, etc. So why you should simply ask the question, why would GWI at this point in time be reducing the pumping hours and across the country with respect to the production of water at this moment for the communities, etc.
Yes.
Secondly, if you are restructuring, where is your restructuring plan that shows us how these people who are to be fired are redundant?
Hmm.
That has not been put on the table at all in terms of the discussion. I have laid out what we met in 2015, where we took the company up until 2020. Why the staff grew?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the different functionalities introduced, etc. Training done across the board. We never contracted a lot of people, a lot of people out. We never outsourced a lot of the requirements. We built in-house support with people. We reduced a lot of expenditure. And therefore, it is not understandable and not justifiable that at this stage, these people are being removed. And so the question for me that they must answer is, what are the functions that you are reducing,
Yeah.
and how are you reducing it with respect to the staff, with staff? Because this afternoon I looked at a spreadsheet which shows that it's like if you're cherry picking different people from different areas
Yeah.
with no organized approach to it. So I honestly asked that the cabinet and the president, and I suppose the vice president, to ask GWI what are they doing, especially in the light of COVID.
Yes.
Liliendal gets its supply. If they study, the Liliendal gets its supply from Georgetown. Now, all that is happening with the increases, you are going to be stopping your pumping from 10 o'clock at night to restart at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you say you don't know what's going to happen, what's happening in the hospitals, so how can you come to a conclusion that you are going to reduce your pumping hours with respect to the volume of water produced in this time with respect to COVID? Plus, we have a number
Yeah.
of squatter settlements in Georgetown alone that require access with a high density in their homes. So, what it is that we are saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Doc, and outside of that, I mean, we've seen some harrowing stories, and let me just pull this up because I want to bring in our political correspondent, Miss Nicole Telford, to join the conversation. But I want to read something that I
One
saw.
moment.
I want to read something that I saw just now, and it really hurt me to see this. Let me see if I can read it. I can pull it up here. Right? Give me a second. It an account of someone who lost their job, and we showed a video yesterday of a young man who is disabled, and he said he was one the many let go. But then I saw this post by someone, right? And she's saying, hey, these people wait until I finish working on Monday to give me this letter. I cried bitterly because I just started UG last September. I never had any issues since I was working there. My file is clean. And I mean, in simple terms, you hear the stress. And this is multiplied times over. Times over. To help us unpack these and all the other human stories that coming out of this, and especially in this COVID time, let's welcome our political correspondent, Miss Nicole Telford. Nicole, welcome to the Rush this afternoon. Nicole?
Good afternoon, Randy. Good afternoon, Randy, and good afternoon to your viewers.
Yeah.
Dr. Van Ness Charles and Elson Lowe, your guest.
Yes.
Dr. Charles, I must first congratulate you on providing the quality of service you did under the stewardship of GWI, especially to the over 96,000 homes that first received water during that period between 2015 and 2020. One thing I'd like to add, that post that Randy just read, when I read it, I cried. And I cried because of the emotion I felt for that worker that was given that letter. And there was another worker, a man by the name of Joel something, who
Yes.
Randy spoke with yesterday.
Mm.
Who Randy spoke with
I'll play
yesterday.
the video a little later down.
Now, they have so many people. I've sat in many a board meetings with Dr. Charles, and Dr. Charles outlined with specifics. Today, he re-emphasized them. So all of the data that he has given, it's out there. It's on DPI, it's in Chronicle, it's in all the newspapers. He even advertised them, what he was doing and how he was strengthening and improving that water sector to provide good quality water to the people of Guyana. And it is painful to know that Sheikh Bash will say today that he did due diligence. He did not do any due diligence. It is explained by Dr. Charles that this that they're doing is politically motivated, or there's some other influence into that, because if you look at the 2030 Millennium Development Goals, what they're talking about, improve water supply, improve health, improve sanitation, and what you need for that, not water, and what you need for that. You need the employment of people in every sector to monitor and manage all the sectors and all the different things Dr. Charles has spoken of.
Yeah.
Right? My question would be, you understand, to the trade unions that are representing these people, why aren't they stepping out? That would be my question. I don't know if Dr. Charles could possibly say anything on that.
Right.
But
Before we get,
I am just worried about where we're going.
I'll take that question to Dr. Charles, but before we get there, let me bring in Elsa. Elsa, you're the Youth and Economic Advisor at the Office of Leader of the Opposition. We've seen the firing of public servants, and even this person who commented here, obviously is someone who is seeking higher education, just started UG. How is this, especially in this time of COVID, affecting especially young people?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to start off by making sure that something is clear.
Yeah.
We're hearing talk about costs, about there being too many workers, and so on. But just recently, we saw, a little while ago, we saw that more funds was given to Gaisuko. We're
Yeah.
seeing Gaisuko being expanded. And so I don't think it's a realistic argument to say that this is because of costs and because of workers. You're employing who you want to employ, and you're firing who you want to fire. Just say it. That's what the evidence would indicate. Because you could even go deeper and say that the workers at GWI are adding value to the economy, are providing services, are expanding access to water. Whereas we know that typically was 50% or 60% of what goes on of Gaisuko is funded by taxpayers. So it has not been sustainable for forever.
And it makes no money.
So
It brings nothing into the
it,
country.
it brings nothing in. And so you're firing people who are benefiting the country and favoring people who are taking money out of the public purse. That's the first point. The second point is, of course, I am a very staunch advocate for University of Guyana being free. And I think that one of the things that's being hinted at in that individual statement about being dismissed is that they're now thinking to themselves, how am I going to afford my UG fees? Right? This job is what is keeping me afloat. And for young people in Guyana, when we have the fastest, sometimes the second fastest growing economy in the world, to continue to bear that anxiety, how am I going to afford this? How am I going to be able to do this? That is a really shameful thing. And so now that we have the resources, we should absolutely be seeing relief come to students, and that is what young people are facing. Even in the pandemic, young people have now had to make the switch to digital. This is running on the assumption that everybody has a smartphone, that everybody has access to internet. These things cost money, and we haven't seen the type of support to students that we want to see to facilitate this transition. What we're seeing is money spent on areas that you wonder whether those are the right areas and why it is that they're being spent there. Now there's the question of this outsourcing of GWI operations.
Yeah.
Why in the world would you get rid of workers to go and outsource the same job that the workers are doing? That's strange. And the first question I'd ask is, are you going to be saving the country substantial sums? First. And second, if you're not going to be saving the country substantial funds, and it is indeed going to cost more, that's what we remains to be seen. Is it going to cost more? Then I would ask, and I'm not saying that it is this, but I think it's reasonable to ask: is this another case of procurement fraud?
Hmm.
Are we seeing a form of fraud to facilitate supporters getting a bite? I'm not saying that's what's going on, but I'm saying that these are the types of questions the Guyanese need to ask. Because if you're going to get rid of government workers to bring in private people to do the same thing, it better be costing less and you better be getting better quality service. Because otherwise, that's a big red flag and we need to look closely at that.
Doc, as Elson brought up the numbers there, do you buy the argument that um, GWI is sending these workers home for purely an economic reason, especially when we see money's being pumped into Gaisuku? What is your thought on that? I know you're coming from a unique perspective. So I'm interested to know whether or not that argument can hold.
No, Randy, when we took over in 2015,
Mm-hmm,
it was a house of outsourcing.
mm-hmm,
And what they're talking about the 96 million for the staff is
yeah,
incorrect because they had contracted workers for the tune of more than 151 million.
mm-hmm,
Secondly, I showed where we had the savings because when they contracted even for transportation of workers to go and do the works in the field, etc., it was a significant amount of money being spent per month. We met zero transport facility, vehicles. When we left, we had 19 canters to move crews around.
mm-hmm,
We contracted for a crane. If you wanted a crane for 1 hour, you had to pay for 4 hours for that crane. We eventually bought a crane for GWI, a low bed to move that crane, plus other equipment, the rigs. We bought 2 rigs, etc., etc. So I have shown in the presentation this morning all of the savings that we have made
mm-hmm,
in terms of even the mechanic shop to deal with the vehicles because we were spending more than about $55 million a month on the mechanics.
mm-hmm.
So all of those figures are there, and Elson may want to take a look as an economist. But clearly, you have greater sustainability and continuity of your service. We have also shown from a World Bank report that the average amount of money from expenditure that you spend on staff for operations across the Caribbean was about 35%.
Mm-hmm.
Guyana in 2014, 2013 was spending 19%. Now, no wonder when we got in there, you had poor water quality. You had hours of delivery of service, sometimes in one area, 10 hours. In Agricola, you had 8 hours. In another area, 14 hours. And so it was a menu of hash and all sort of nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
There was no treatment plant that operated for 24 hours. When we left, 23 of the 24 plants were operating for 24 hours. Continued supply along the coast, 95%. So, what they are trying to do is to reverse the clock to outsource, give contracts right now as we speak for
Wow, wow.
maintenance of one well, which has gone on for over 2 months in Blackbush Polder at Yakosari, $9 million. Now the vehicle with all of the sophisticated equipment which we imported from the Netherlands for well maintenance costs 45 million.
Mm-hmm.
One day Bash said it's not working, and the next day we can see the thing functioning.
Hmm.
It's the trap to say we haven't got this, therefore we must outsource and give contracts. And I've shown from the forensic report how they operated their contracts. That the bids were to open on March 25th, but the bids were actually, the evaluation committee was set up for March 18th, and the contract was awarded the said date when the bids were supposed to be opening 7 days later.
Wow. Wow.
So those are the types of things that we have to deal with, and I think we have to stand firm. That I do not think, and that's why I'm saying this to the cabinet and the president. It's in your court, because you cannot be having GWI reduce services in terms of the delivery of water across the country in the time of COVID. And they gotta answer this question.
Yeah.
Bash, Mr. Jordan, are the principals who gotta answer these questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm happy that you're able to offer that unique perspective as former head there at GWI, and I hope that persons are listening. Elson, um, let me just give you a final opportunity to sum up what we're seeing here, not only with GWI, but throughout the public sector. Uh, and I'll give Doc the final word before we close off this segment.
Thank you. I think one of the important things to always consider is this. We are in the midst of a severe national natural disaster, both the flood and COVID-19, the pandemic.
Hmm.
And in those circumstances, what you should be focused on is reviving the economy, is promoting business, is getting people to work. It is not, under any conceivable framework, laying off workers and reducing the size of government and reducing consumption. Right now, because of the pandemic, consumption is going to be lower than it would otherwise have been. People are not able to spend as much. People are not able to go out as much. So you want this government to be putting money into the economy to help to revive the economy, to help it to cash itself again. And so what they're doing in letting go of all of these public servants is quite the opposite of how you're really supposed to deal with a national crisis. What you're supposed to do, if you wanted to let go of people gradually, you do that a year or two from now when things have normalized. But in letting go of such a large number of people in the midst of the pandemic, they are slowing Guyana's economic recovery, and they're actually causing businesses who would themselves have been getting patronage from these same workers that are fired to suffer because they're not going to be getting that patronage in the same way. So this is actually undermined the economic recovery of Guyana. As far as young people is concerned, young people often will work in jobs with a lower income, so they are the ones who are going to bear a lot of the brunt of a slower economy. And so I think it contributes to a general sense that the PPP has mismanaged their Guyana's economic recovery, and that their focus has just not been on COVID, when COVID is the most important gripping issue of the day.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And you brought up an important point. And Doc, I'll probably leave you with this part of it. There's going to be an economic fallout of the flooding that we're seeing, especially with the prices on the market. Uh, you know, and I hope that we're bracing for that. There is some sort of easing happening. I don't know. But I'll give you the last word on all the topics that we discussed today.
Well, let me say, Elson, let's follow on from Elson in terms of
Mhm.
the economic dislocation.
Yeah.
It's very, very important. Remember that this is a pandemic.
Mhm.
So even the remittances that were coming from north to Guyana, it's
Yeah.
going to be reduced significantly, and it's going to impact on our people at home. Now, look out for what's going to happen with our people in terms of the pandemic and the flooding and the mental health issues that are emerging rapidly uh, as a result of these two issues. And it doesn't seem that we would have learned from the last floods. So I think one has to look and at again we talk about the safety net for the pandemic. But now here we are with the floods. When you see what has happened to many of those homes
Mhm.
in Kokwani and all along the place, now we're not getting any robust solution out of the administration on these matters. We need to have a robust response. And yes, you have the CDC, but it is more than the CDC. It has to be a strong interministerial task force that will give us a sense that these things are being considered. Right now, for example, in many countries with respect to COVID, the mortgages are delayed somewhat. You're getting some responses from the commercial banks. We're not
Mhm.
hearing anything from the commercial banks in Guyana. We're not hearing anything with the guidance from the central bank in terms of how these burdens are to be eased because of this issue. And many people don't understand, for example, the mental health effects that are happening as a
Yes.
result of COVID. And now you're going to have the issue of with the flooding. So it's a serious one is a natural disaster, but both are national security issues, which I think calls for a national resolution and resolve for us to come together to resolve the problems immediately.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Van West Charles and Mr. Elson Lowe joining us today. Gentlemen, it was a pleasure chatting with you this afternoon. We want to say thank you very much for stopping by and be a friend of the show. Don't be afraid to jump in and help us unpack some of the issues that we're seeing in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
friend.
Right. That was Dr. Van West Charles and Mr. Elson Lowe. They're discussing many of the issues that we are unpacking in the country. I'm still joined by Ms. Nicole Telford, who is our political correspondent, and we will round out the show. Nicole, you're still with us.
Yes, I am.
Right. We have some more issues to unpack before we were quickly coming down the program time. It was a packed program today. We have about 4 or 5 minutes to go, Nicole, but I wanted to ensure that you're here to help me unpack some of these issues. Right away, we're going to do it like a speed segment, Nicole. So ensure you buckle in, you have your seatbelt in because we're going to go through these issues very quickly. One, right? This is what we're seeing. This is what we are seeing here, Nicole. We see the Prime Minister writing Mr. Slow again. We see the Prime Minister writing Mr. Slow again. Of course, we spoke about this issue. We spoke about the fact that it seems as though there's pressure on the Police Service Commission to get these gentlemen to move from their positions. Let me see if I can give you some details to those persons who don't know about this story. Right, as part of the government quest to remove the chairman of the Police Service Commission, Mr. Paul Slow, the office of the Prime Minister, Mark Phillips, has written Slow again, asking him to show cause why he should not be hacked over the Commission's involvement in constitutional case again, Nicole, we see this happening. I think this is not pressure. I don't know
Innocent.
what is. Go ahead.
It's always innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
And like you rightly said, and like all have said, if you're accused of something, it must be proven in a court of law and determined that you are, complicit with whatever.
Yeah.
That has not been proven.
Yes.
But it shows clearly it was the charges are trumped up by the PPPC administration, and it's trumped up to get their own way and to input all the people who will be the yes men to the PPPC.
Right.
Completely dismantling the organization and of the law enforcement agency in Guyana.
Yeah.
That's what they intend to do. They need yes men to do their bidding. So the whole place can go back just like how it was prior 2015.
Clearly.
Or earlier in the year of 2015 going back. So that's my thought on that.
Clearly. So much news, so little time, Nicole, we wind down. But I wanted to talk about this. I want this, and then we have one more issue. We see Mr. Matthews. Many persons have been asking, what is happening with Mr. Matthews? What is happening with Mr. Matthews? We see here that political activist and online talk show host Gavin Matthews was today charged under the Cybercrime Act for statements he made about the culture minister during one of his social media talk shows. He's now on $100,000 bail. what is happening in our country, Nicole?
Well, if Mr. Matthews said something that warrants uh, 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 um, slander or libel, then that is to be dealt with. But what I can say is that they have hundreds of talk shows,
Mm-hmm.
right, all over in North America, and hundreds of cultural arts performances and shows. For example, Saturday Night Live and all those shows. So I want to ask the question. Um, they take certain things as joke, like the performances at the cultural center that will implicate and call the names and so on of leaders
Yeah.
in position or people who make the news, because that will be stifling the cultural arts, and it will also be stifling
Freedom of
um,
expression.
the freedom of expression and everything.
Yes.
So if you take that into consideration, remember I said, if you say something that is liable or slanderous, well then I would understand. But if you just call somebody's name and tag them to a particular issue that they have committed and you are being targeted,
Mm-hmm.
then that is suppression of people's voices, and it is tantamount to suppression of freedom of expression right
This,
here in Guyana
this
by
is,
the PPPC.
if this is not a sign that we're living in a dictatorship like country, or we're living in a dictatorship, because if a talk
Man,
show
this is not
host,
dictatorship like. This is not.
this is
This is not
dictatorship.
dictatorship like Randy. It is dictatorship. We are in a dictatorship. The PPP does not know how to run a country in a democracy. They say the name. All of them say democracy, 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 but look at their actions. It does not speak of democracy.
Yeah. Let me say this. Allegedly, Mr. Matthews said that Mr. Charles Ramson is a terrorist. He said that, this was the allegations. Allegedly said that he's a part of a terrorist organization, which is the PPP, and that makes him a terrorist. And apparently, this is what Mr. Charles Ramson was emotionally distressed about, and made a report to the police station. And now we see a man having to pay $100,000 bail because allegedly he called Mr. Ramson a terrorist because he believes the PPP to be a terrorist organization. This, based on my investigation, allegedly that is what he said, and I find it to be strange, Nicole. I find it really strange when we have these. Don't want to be crass here, but these comics running about, people like Critic calling people all manner of names on their social media shows, and we don't see them being dragged before the court, and we wonder what is happening. And I believe somehow that this is an attempt by the PPP to kind of silence this media, this way that people communicate with people. They want to have control over all of what the communication channels.
It is.
Yes.
Yes, it is an attempt.
Yeah.
It is an attempt. It's not an attempt. It's a direct action to silence others.
Yeah.
Right? But the PPP must be held accountable too for all the ills and all the stuff that they attack people and call them, especially Bardagio and Ashley Singh. Ashley Singh stood up in Parliament in 2012 and he called everyone hooligans. It's on the answer because he said hooligans. I wrote about it on a Facebook post about him calling people hooligans. You understand? And those things should be distressful to lots of people. Right?
Yeah.
Those things should be distressful to a lot of people. I must say that it should be in the answered. I don't know if it is, but he did stand up and say it, and there's footage of him saying it. Okay. You understand? But let me tell you something, Randy. It's stifling, and it is, look, if somebody goes to an election and they win, or they're installed, or whatever, they're in charge of managing the country. But the Jesus man manage the country like an expert manager. do the necessary things. Don't be stifling people or dragging people to court. Look, take for example Christopher Jones. When they had 47 policemen and 10 police vehicles, be it motorbikes and vehicles in itself, out in front of Christopher Jones' home for 5 barber chairs. Is that waste of resources? Compare that to the Guyana sugar industry and the GWI workers that are being let go. How do they explain all of these things? How do they explain the release of over 2,300 persons? How do they explain all of these instances? The closing down of the Bertram College School of College, Bertram Collins
College School of the Public
College
Service.
of Public Service. The St. John's Ambulance Brigade nurses being let go. The data entry clerks being let go.
People, yes.
The 240, the 240 SIP workers being let go. You understand? And they've re-employed 80, but mostly in the areas that supported them. Not renewing the contracts of many of those SIP workers. What are they making? A cocktail for disaster? Crime is on the increase. They are not figuring out why crime is on the increase.
Nicole, like many things, we don't have any explanation that is sensible for what are the things that the PAP are doing. But I know we have Miss Annette Ferguson, MP Annette Ferguson's program Across the Waves coming up next, and we don't want to hinder that. So we're going to sign up. But one more thing, Nicole, one more thing. I want to bring an issue to the table that I will be digging deeper into. A number of teachers, and I heard about this issue, and I was doing some investigation. There are a number of teachers who have had a lingering problem with their salaries, a lingering problem, and they said they would have noticed it in 2017. Some of them are being paid at least $13,000 and some $9,000 short on their salaries every month. And this problem has been prolonging since 2017, and now it is still prolonging. And we want to bring it to light because these teachers are frustrated, Nicole, and we'll be doing some more explanation a little later down. Some 115 confirmed teachers who are affected by this. And it seems as though there is some problem with the system and they are being pushed around, and we want to bring it to light, Nicole. Remind me, I know we're going to be unpacking some of these, and I want to do a proper investigation into this matter because we want to be able to bring it to light, bring it to the public's attention so that they can see some sort of relief in this matter. I just wanted to drop that in there and let the public know that we'll be investigating this particular issue in coming shows, right? But let us go.
Well, yeah, and we need to contact the former finance minister too.
Yes.
On the issue.
We'll
to
be
see where
that
is.
Yes, definitely investigating this issue. We'll reach out to the Ministry of Education. We'll reach out to the Minister of Finance. Everybody who has, because imagine for 3-4 years you're getting short money. Think about the amount of money that these teachers are owed now. In the millions. And where's this money going?
Yes.
Where's the money going? That's the question. Right? But as we go, let us remind persons that there is a flood emergency center at the leader of the opposition's office. You can call 503-2465 to give and share information on what is happening in your region or area. And also not to forget that there is a flood relief effort by the National Congress of Women, PNCR, and you can clothing and cleaning materials, and you can go straight to the headquarters of the NCW that is on Public Road, Kitty, or you can call the telephone number 603. Let me show if we got the number correctly. You can call the telephone number 603-9575 to make your donations. Let us support our friends. Let us support our comrades who are in need this evening. Nicole, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We thank you very much for being a part of the program as usual.
Thank you.
Right. Folks, let's continue to work for national development. My name is Randolph Critchlow. Do enjoy the rest of your evening and stay safe.